Mixing with Mike Ultimate Plugin Guide, must-have plugin from Sound Toys called the Decapitator. Decapitator is a saturation plugin and absolutely one that you have to have in your collection. I could demonstrate this on 100 different instruments and come up with all kinds of really unique things with it. It's an amazing thing to use, particularly in this world today where we have a lot of with loudness and kind of saturation that comes into a lot of the production styles that lead to loudness. It's like a huge part of it. And this is like an invaluable thing. This is, if you're not familiar with it, once you start using it, you'll quickly understand what it is and how much you've actually heard it on different things. So it's a very powerful thing. Let's just kind of do like a quick overview of the plugin. Everything starts with the basic style here. If you start, this is basically working with different analog components, and with each analog component, it has certain saturation characteristics. So the A is from an Ampex 350, going back to the 1950s. This is a tube tape machine that was used for recording, right? Essentially, it was the earliest form of multi-track recording, or live to mono, live to two-track recording. So depending upon the model that you got, so this there's going to be some characteristics, sounds that are there. Also coming from this realm is the EMI TG channel, but this is the Chandler version of it, which is a basic remake of the original TG12345 console and a lot of the components there. So that legacy extends all the way back to the 1960s, to the mid-1960s, when those early TG consoles were built in Abbey Road Studios with the EMI. EMI owned it. Neve, the Neve is a 1057 emulation. So this is kind of before the 80 series and the 1073, which came out in 1969. So this is about overdriving those components. And then if you're familiar with the thermionic culture, there's a culture vulture, and the culture vulture has two basic settings, which is the triode mode, which is warm and kind of punchy, and then also the pentode settings, which has like a bit more edge and odd harmonic distortion characteristics. You have a drive control and a punish button, which basically allows you to overdrive the signal kind of feeding into it. There were two filters here that work prior to the distortion that allow you to shape the signal going into the distortion mode here, and then one filter that occurs after all of the distortion. And this is a thing that a lot of people are not aware of. So what you have here is a low cut filter, and what the thump does is it puts a little resonance on the cutoff frequency right there, so you get a little bit of a bump right where that cutoff frequency is. You have a tone control, and this is kind of like a tilt EQ, more or less, where it will kind of shape either adding low end and cutting highs, or adding highs and cutting lows. And so it starts at basically a flat perspective, kind of right in the middle there. The high cut filter works, and this works after all of the distortion. So all of your distortion comes from the drive control or the punish control. And the punish control essentially adds like 20 dB of gain going into whatever device that you select down here. And then you can run the drive accordingly from there. So we'll kind of talk about that and how that level works, because it doesn't come out 20 dB louder, which is a good thing. It's compensated for, and we'll talk a little bit about that. So there's a high cut, and then there is a steep switch. So what the steep switch does, it changes the actual order of the filter. So it's normally a soft filter with the steep switch setting out, which is like 6 dB per octave, a first order filter. If you put that in, it's a 30 dB per octave filter. So that's like a fifth order filter, right? So every 6 dB per octave ends up being the order that you go through. The auto switch is like a gain makeup. So as you move the drive control up, you'll notice that the output gain drops down in opposition to it. So it's kind of inversely ganged together with that. And then you have a wet dry control, which allows you to put it on the insert of any channel, saturate like crazy, and then blend the dry signal in with the wet signal. And that's the basics of it. So let's kind of zoom in, and I just have like a bass here. So this is bypass. It already has a little bit of saturation on it here. So even with without the drive setting, you can already hear a little bit of a coloration difference. So I like the EMI setting here. So let's just kind of start with that, and then we can kind of play around and work with it. So here's what we can do. So I can shift the tone to be now. This is kind of working as if I'm driving more high frequency energy into it. It's saturating it and swallowing it up a little bit more quickly, and that might be different. Right, so we can adjust the characteristic there, and then if we wanted to, we could also go to a punish mode. And if I want to shape this, I can also and this is like, because this is prior to the distortion, this will kind of shape, make the low end a little bit more flabby, where otherwise this will kind of shape tone away from that low end, because this is mostly low end signal. That's where you're getting that basic vibe, but this is keeping it essentially full frequency. So I can get the overdrive. Just to give you an idea what the original is. You get this really rich, deep analog overdrive, and every sound will be a little bit different, like the way that you kind of shape things going into it. That's like an extreme setting. You can also use it in a much more subtle way to kind of enrich the sound. So maybe I want to use this. Just to add a little bit of a, right, so now I have all the original low end, but I can make it image a little bit better. And then blend in the amount of that tone so I can keep it from necessarily overdriving or becoming farty on the low end there. Shape that in, and then work with my mix control to do that. And again, it's going to be like the approach, as long as you kind of understand what the basic characteristics are and how the different settings work, understanding that the high cut works after all of the overdrive, that these two filters work feeding in. So sometimes you switch it towards the bright, you can see where the punish, and it just pushed more high frequency energy and it just got completely swallowed up by it. So that tone control is not like a pure thing. It's not like an equalization circuit that would occur afterwards. that would kind of filter things out. But basically, this is there to kind of help you to control the fuzz, and the tone is allowing you to kind of shift around and set up in the way that you want it to feed in for the overdrive, and then you're selecting the type of flavor of overdrive here by doing the different selections here, and then you can kind of play with it. But it's really, really powerful, and especially for low-end instruments, part of what you can get with that harmonic distortion, if you use it in a more subtle way, is something that will help the depth and imaging character to come out. But it's also good when you want to just, decimate something and really crush something. So it has a lot of flexibility, and a lot of different ways that you can use it. And again, just like anything, I think with any plugin, you have to sit down, you have to put it on a lot of different instruments, work with it in a lot of different ways, and figure out what it does, what it can do, and get used to it. So when you pick it up as a tool, you kind of have a good idea of what the parameters are for it. And I think once you start using it, you'll quickly realize that it becomes a regular part of your mixing work whenever you need saturation. It's a really powerful one. And Sound Toys really always makes amazing stuff like this on the saturation end. And for the ultimate plugin guide and mixing with Mike, it is a must-have plugin, Sound Toys Decapitator.